Hello everybody, I'm Michelle Anderson, founder of Clarinet Mentors, and today I want to talk about trilling on the clarinet. I'm going to show you three main things in this video. First of all, the basics of clarinet trills. What are they? How do you do them? Secondly, I'll show you some techniques to help make trilling work faster for your fingers. And finally, I'll show you some of the more common alternate fingerings that can make a lot of trills easier to use if you're not familiar with them. What is a trill? Well, a trill is basically decoration in the music. It's an effect the composer will put in to make a note sound prettier, to make it sound more intense. In a full ensemble piece, it might be just a decorative tone color on top of everyone else, but it looks something like this. You can see here we have a note, and above it, it says TR, and there's a wavy line. You might see both of those symbols, you might just see one of them, but basically it's a trill. There's kind of a simple rule on clarinet for generally how we do trills. You take whatever note is written, and that's your starting note, and you always go to the note written above it. So don't worry if it's half step, whole step, you just go to the note above it. So in my sample case here, we have a G. The note above G is A, so I'm going to be trilling to A. Now the only other thing I really need to look at is the key signature. If my key signature said A flat, then I would follow the key signature and my trill would be G to A flat. In this case, I'm fingering my high G, my written note, and I'm just going to go to the note above it, starting on the written note. It might sound something like this. Basically, we move back and forth between the written note and the note above it as quickly as possible. Occasionally, you will see an accidental being a sharp or flat or natural that's not in the key signature written right into the trill. So let's look at my example card here. Now we have our G trilling, but you notice there's a little flat written on top here. What that would indicate is that now I would be going from G to the note above it flat, to A flat. So that's assuming the key signature perhaps had A natural. Now I would be going G to A flat instead of G to A. Changes the trill a little bit. A little more suspenseful, and sometimes trills are meant to cause suspense. All right, so what are the challenges with playing a trill? Well, here's one that a lot of people have trouble with. I'm not sure why this is, but when we trill, our brain sometimes can't count. Don't know what it is, but something about trilling, we lose track of counting. So you may find when you're trilling, it's harder to play the correct rhythm. A really simple way to fix that is to play whatever music you're working on without the trill 2 or 3 times, just so you get used to the basic rhythm of the piece. Perhaps counting in your head, if it's a whole note, as I had written there, we would just be thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, and then trying to trill while thinking that at the same time. It is tricky in a way. But I would recommend practicing it without the trill until you kind of know how the piece goes, and then add it back in. All right, having said that, a lot of people find that their fingers don't move quickly enough on the instrument, and they want their trills to sound faster or more brilliant. So I want to show you some basic technique that might make your trills a lot easier to play, and this is worth learning. Whatever your trill is, and at the end of this video I'm going to show you some alternate fingerings. One thing I will say is if the fingering is really, really awkward, odds are there may be an easier fingering for doing it. These alternate fingerings are sometimes notes that don't sound great if we were to linger on them, but at the speed in which we do a trill, they go by quickly enough that people won't notice. Now let's say we are using the best fingering. In my example case, from high G to A, where I'm wiggling this third finger here on my left hand. Well, for a lot of people, this is kind of a weak finger on both of our hands, right? Our ring fingers, they're not as strong as the other fingers, and sometimes it's hard to move that finger quickly. So you might want to know, how can I develop speed in my trills? You definitely can make your fingers faster on any trill in a relatively short time just by practicing that particular trill. But here's some sort of basic finger technique things that will really help with that. Often when we're concentrating on something, because it's difficult, we tend to put a lot of tension into our hands, and that will show up with smacking fingers, really hammering down on the instrument, and also fingers that move really far off of the instrument. So one of our basic good habits on clarinet, always, whether we're playing something fast or slow, is to have our fingers remain close to the instrument and barely move. When it comes off the key, it should just do this. Just tiny little movements, and also very gentle. If we start slamming hard, it really slows our fingers down, and it'll probably tire them out faster too. So a great exercise is just to take the trill you're working on, and without actually playing it, hold your hands where you can see them and just move your fingers. And right now I'd be looking at that finger and saying, is it arched? Our fingers play much, much faster when they're rounded than the habit that we like to do, which is this, sort of squishing them in at this knuckle here. Instead, if we can arch it, our fingers do move faster, even though that might feel unfamiliar and strange to you. So is my finger arched? Is it gentle? And is it staying really close to the keys? Those are the three important questions related to hand position that will definitely help you build speed as you're working through this. For sure, some finger combinations are going to feel relatively easy for you, and others are going to feel hard. And that might vary from person to person. It's whatever fingers you naturally have that are already trained to move quickly. Other ones might just lag behind. You can train them and you can encourage them to do more. So a simple exercise might be to take your trill, let's say I'm using my high G to A, and set a metronome. And for a moment, just consider it to be in rhythm, like 16th notes. Do, 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 do. So I'd have a slow metronome speed. I would be concentrating on all the finger habits we just did and just playing that. Then I would set the metronome faster. And faster. Now at some point, when we start to reach kind of our top speed, you're going to notice your finger starts getting more intense and it starts slapping on the keys, and you just have to say, oh, relax. Not only do we want our fingers relaxed, we really want the tension here to let us go. So a great habit when you have your instrument in your mouth and you're about to play is just to relax your shoulders. Tension is what slows us down more than anything, so let's go for having it feel easy. So using a metronome, speeding it up is one way to do it. Now some trills are meant to be just kind of the same speed all the way through. Sometimes for musical effect, we might have a trill that starts slowly and speeds up, just for beauty. And that's a lovely effect too. So you can play around with the speed of your trills for musical reasons, but at first you want to have your fingers just really good at doing it technically. There are some trills that I find really tricky to play. For example, there's a really fun piece written for orchestra called Capriccio Espagnol by Rimsky-Korsakov, and it has some great clarinet solos in them, but some of them have really fast trills, and these were challenging for my fingers. How did I work on that piece? Well, it's interesting. For me, the first set of trills is the G to A we were just talking about. For some reason, that one works pretty well. Maybe because I've played pieces like that. But the second one, which is an A to a B, I don't know why, but my hands feel thuddy and slow. It's kind of like I can go da-da-da-da-lump and then ta-ka-ta-ka-ta. And so what I need to do is work on that single trill. And the way I would do it is really focus on relaxation in that middle finger, small movement, and I would do it very slowly. Just and then speeding it up from there. But I spent a long time on this. Not that it takes you a long time, it's just that we need to do it properly. When I really dialed into the fact that I needed to focus mostly on lightness and gentleness, my speed got way faster. I could save you a lot of time instead of saying just concentrate and do it. Really just focus on the lightness, and usually the speed will come very nicely. In the write-up underneath this video, there is a link to a trill chart, which shows you some of the common alternate fingerings that we can use. And I'll just quickly show you some of the ones that are really handy to know that you may not already know. So these side keys here at the top of our top joint, the bottom of our top joint, are all trill fingerings. Let's say we're playing from our A, our throw tone A, and we have to go to B natural. Well, imagine trying to quickly move all your fingers back and forth. Although it would be some kind of great fingering exercise, not easy to do. For that reason, our top key was invented here. Out of these four keys, the top one does give us a whole step trill, so either from A to B, or if I was playing B flat, it would take me to C. They're not very nice sounding, they're not in tune, but if we do it quickly enough, nobody will notice. If I linger on that B, you can hear it's out of tune and kind of funny sounding. So I don't recommend using that as a common alternate to your full fingering high B, but good one to use in a trill. Other common trill fingerings, let's say you have a high G sharp to a high A sharp, which is like a B flat. Boy, you can do that using some kind of normal fingering, but that's tricky. So a really nice fingering to know about is that you can just lift your top finger here. Now this is a little bit unstable, and if we were to keep this finger off the whole long, your tone would probably crack. So my trick to it is I barely lift my finger off the hole. I have it, in fact, closer than I normally would, and I do it really quickly. If I linger with this finger off, people often tend to lose that note. But it's a very nice trill fingering to know about. Of course, all of our chromatic fingerings work great for trills. So if we had to trill from a low B flat to a low B natural, we can use our fourth key here. If we had to go from F to F sharp, we can use our side chromatic fingerings. So a lot of those fingerings work as is. So as I said, usually if the fingering feels really awkward, there may be another way to do it. Another trill that's quite awkward, whether if we're in the low register, this pinky here, low G sharp to A, or if we're in the high register, that would be an E flat to an E, or even to the F above it. I don't know of a great alternate fingering, but for some people, instead of moving all three fingers, let's say I'm going from E flat to F, some people leave their pinky down and they find that faster. So I can play it with all three fingers moving, or I can leave this pinky down. I find about half the people find it easier with pinky down, about half the people find it easier with the pinky moving with the other fingers. It's up to you to explore. Anyway, that gives you a good introduction to trills. And I want to say I'm a big believer that when you learn the clarinet, if you have simple systems, if you know how to do it, it's so much easier to play. And that's what Clarinet Mentors is all about. If you've enjoyed this video today and you're not already a member of the Clarinet Mentors community, I invite you to join. It's free. All you have to do is go to the link below, www.learnclarinetnow.com, and sign up, and every 2 weeks you'll get a clarinet newsletter that's full of how to do it, step-by-step systems to make your playing easier. So I invite you to join in, and I look forward to seeing you on our next video.